Hello and welcome to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. It's time to get fired up. Make sure you find the Raptor Show wherever you listen to podcasts, and please rate and review the program. I'm your host, Wayne Blue. Once again, Blake Murphy is on a well-earned break, so we will see him in roughly 2 weeks. But in the meantime, I got a cast of friends to help co-host the show. Once again, Vivek Jacob, writer at large, is here with me. What's going on, V? Did you enjoy that game last night?
I did. It was a great win to, start off the post-All-Star break stretch. Big win. Love the way Scotty came out. Love the way the whole team came out with a lot of energy, a lot of defensive intensity.
Yep.
And I think, the goal now is to see if you can carry that over into the next night.
Listen, I would love to see the Raptors, just get a win over the Hawks. I feel like, the Raptors have beat them once this year. They've lost twice, and the Raptors will play them tonight at 7:30. But, the last game against the Hawks, the way it ended, it was really close. Trae Young jumping into your elbow 25 times a game. Just the Sadiq Bey put back for the win. Like, it just didn't leave a great feeling. So I understand that the Raptors obviously beyond the results necessarily.
I'm pretty sure Sadiq had like 7 offensive rebounds in that game.
Yeah. Well, that's the one where afterwards Darko was like, everyone's got to learn how to box out.
Yeah.
We're going to work on box out drills. We're going to work on closeout drills. The Raptors, they have gone back to basics in many, many ways for this younger team. But, yeah, it'll be nice to beat the Hawks, man, honestly. They just annoy me as a team.
It will be.
Yeah.
But looking at this Nets game, I think, we had our own expectations coming in. The Nets heading one way, the Raptors heading in a similar direction. So it was going to be interesting to see how it played out. But again, you want to set a tone for how you want this final third of the season to play out. And so I think Scotty, right out of the gate, Ben Simmons tries to be aggressive right off the top.
It's like, surprise, I'm going to get one layup in. I'll finish my job for the whole night if I get this one layup. I get it.
And Scotty says, no, I'm going to reject you at the rim, hustles down the floor, gets a layup.
Yep.
Knocks down a 3 a little later and does the Mikal Bridges celebration in his face.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I really like the 3-point celebration as a form of taunting now. The different players, you know what I mean? Because we also saw Dennis, for example, hit the freeze on the Raptors bench in his one basket of the game. But then we also saw Emmanuel quickly hit the freeze against Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah. The referees are really just anti-dunk taunting now.
Right.
It's like you do anything after a dunk and it's a tech. But you can do whatever you want after a 3.
Yeah, well, we even saw, before the All-Star break, it was, Yusuf Nurkic going up against Draymond Green, and they're hitting, literally turnaround layups against each other and then slapping the ground. So, exactly, yeah. The only thing you can't do is hang on the rim or, just yell at a guy in his face. But,
yeah.
No, I loved it last night. The energy was good. Again, Raptors win 121-93 over the Brooklyn Nets. A lot to cover, honestly, in this one. But I really wanted to start with just how bad the Nets looked. I was a little shocked. I don't know. There are recognizable names on this thing, and, a lot of players here have been involved in winning situations. But when I saw them, especially in person, I'm just like, this is, up there for, the worst performances I've seen in Scotiabank Arena by a visiting team playing against the Raptors this year. The only comparable I had was when the Pistons were, I think they probably lost 11 straight as part of their 28-game losing streak.
Yeah.
And the Raptors scored 142 on them on this random Sunday night. That's the only one that's close because the Nets were just terrible. And I forgot the fact that, they literally lost by 50 going into the All-Star break. Got their head coach fired, and the new coach wasn't doing that much either. But, I wanted to start with RJ Barrett. RJ, I thought, we had a discussion yesterday about Emmanuel quickly.
And we said we wanted to see aggression and him looking for his shot. And that's what he gave us.
He gave us that exactly. Quickly with 24 points last night, plus 32. Thought he really looked for his shot, and it just looked much more natural for him. RJ, he got a lot of praise post-game from Darko, but I thought in my assessment of it, especially in the first half, he squandered some opportunities. Finished with 12 points, 5 of 13 shooting from the field, missed both free throws, but hit 2 of 4 from 3. What did you make of RJ's game last night?
I think in terms of his individual offense, I know you were saying in the React pod that he seemed a bit forced, and I would agree with that. And I think once he puts his head down, everyone seems to have a pretty good idea of what's happening. I think since he's put on a Raptors uniform, we've seen some good decision making where he has been able to penetrate and then kick out. We did see some of the playmaking in this one where he finishes with 7 assists. A good chunk of them came in the first half, and I thought that set a good tone for the team offensively. But I think when it came to his individual offense, he did struggle a bit. But you live with that, especially when everything is going so right for everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely got a lot of praise for the assists. I think, honestly, for me, it's just it looked like the Nets knew exactly what he wanted to do. And honestly, like most scouting reports should know what he wants to do, right? He does one thing really, really well, RJ Barrett does right now since joining the Raptors. His shot chart, and I looked it up, has just been very, very peculiar. Like, he's got a really strange shot chart. He's only taken, since joining the Raptors, 2 mid-range jumpers. He's played 20 games now with the Raptors. He's taken 2 mid-range jumpers. He's 1 for 2. It doesn't even matter. There's 2 shots. You compare that to he's taken 193 shots within the restricted area. And I think that's how you get to RJ getting much more efficient as a player. He's always looking to get and force his way. And honestly, even when he's forced against going to his left, he usually comes back to his left anyway. And I suppose maybe the left-handedness of the whole thing inspired this kind of comparison, because Darko Rajakovic actually had a really nice quote post-game when asked about RJ Barrett and which former champion that he was studying. So let's run that clip.
RJ made some good reads, especially early in the game, 7 assists. Where have you seen kind of the biggest areas of growth in his ability to read the game and make plays?
Manu Ginobili. We had a conversation, and it was a couple of weeks ago, and I told him that I see some of that type of play in him, that he can actually attack, that he sees the floor really well, and that's what we need from him to do, to be able to score and attack, but also to make right plays and to be playmaker for us. And the very fortunate thing about that is that Manu Ginobili is his favorite player as well. So it really helps that his mindset is the right one of finding the good balance between being aggressive and really finding his teammates. And he ended up game tonight with 7 assists. And to be honest with you, I expect that from him every single night.
I was going to ask if you've had him studying Manu, but it sounds like that's something that he's been doing for a while now.
Yeah, looks like that's his favorite player, and obviously he watched him a lot, and I'm planning of sitting down with him and just watching that film together and enjoying that film together.
Yeah, so, I mean, first off, hey, Manu is an all-timer for me. I'm sure for you too. I mean, Manu is just like such a awesome player, especially obviously winning the 4 chips with the Spurs, I think. Yeah, I mean, do you see a little bit of that with RJ? By the way, also, I had to mention, there was a DJ Carton who's on a 10-day contract. He got his first basket as a Raptor. I think his first basket in the league, too. So I hope they got the game ball for DJ as well. He came in because, again, it was the Raptors were up 30, right? He comes in, 3rd unit, takes it strong. He's also a lefty, by the way, and finishes an and one through contact at the rim. And I loved it. The entire Raptors bench jumped out of their seats to celebrate for the new guy. And the camera actually panned over to RJ, who was actually doing the Moji, switched it up with the left like Ginobili. So, again, just an incredible Toronto connection, an incredible GTA connection for RJ. But, yeah, I mean, do you see some Ginobili in the way RJ can potentially grow here?
I don't really see the comparison.
Okay.
If I'm being completely honest, I think that he's definitely. I think Ginobili is a great person to learn from.
Okay.
And I think that is the type of player that RJ would want to strive to be like. It's a great example to have set. But right now, if I were to compare their games, I would say they're extremely different. I think Ginobili.
What's the most different part about it?
I would say just the variety.
Yeah,
right? And I think
that's the thing with Ginobili. You never knew what he was going to do on the drive. Yeah. There was unpredictability.
Pop would say it too. Like I did not know what he was going to do. And
you have to learn to like live with the fact that
in the beginning he would get mad about it.
Yep.
And then he realized, hey, the only way I'm going to get the best out of this player is to just let him be. And hey, the championships speak for themselves. But yeah, I think when you talk about RJ's shot distribution, to your point, 70% of his shots come within 10 feet of the basket.
Yep.
There's another 26% that are threes. So that's 96% of his shot spectrum.
Yep.
So if you look at over the course of his career, he shoots 30% from 10 to 16 feet. And so I think if he can just work on that in practice and get to a point where he's actually comfortable enough to take them in games, that's when I think we'll see more of, the less one-track minded, hey, at this point, if I've got a slight advantage, if I've got a slight step on my defender, I've got to take it all the way to the basket, right? Because he doesn't have the confidence right now to hit that pull-up, right, from that 10 to 16-foot range. So I think if he can work on that in practice, add that to his game, then you get to a point where it's like, okay, this is an option for me out on the floor now. And I think that's where you'll see his game expand. And I think that's where when you look at a Ginobili, it's like, okay, if I need to pull up from three, I can pull up from three. If I need to hit a mid-range, I can hit a mid-range. If I need to take it all the way to the basket for a slick layup around guys to throw it down.
If I got a dunk on Chris Bosh
exactly.
as a 35-year-old. Yeah.
So he could do it all.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the main thing that I would say when RJ is watching film of Ginobili, it's, hey, how do I expand the variety of my game to make it more like a Manu?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think, in terms of their similarities, at least right now, the biggest similarity is just the ability to get a step on their guy and then find a way to get to the hoop. I always did admire that from Ginobili. I think he probably mixed in a little bit more creativity, but RJ has a little bit of that as well. Sometimes you see him pull out Euro steps, little moves like that just to sort of get himself downhill. But again, like if there's any sort of craftiness that he can add to his game, because to me, I'm not saying he's like one-dimensional, but it's like very clear that he does one thing really, really well, right? And my thing is, what is that secondary skill that comes in? So Darko's talked about, okay, he has 7 assists. Quite frankly, I expect him to do that. First off, love that, okay? High expectations, immigrant dad, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, that's, is that an area you want to see from him? Like something like RJ's always getting something, because he does get to the paint a lot. If you get into the paint, you're almost always seeing the 2 defenders, unless, you're playing the Brooklyn Nets and they're not playing defense, basically. Yeah, that does open a lot of opportunities for kickouts. Do you feel like that passing is something that RJ can replicate on a consistent basis?
I think as he continues to, get to the basket and make reads and learn, the offense, you look at the opportunities that Quickly had to shoot in this game. You look at the opportunities that Gary Trent Jr. had to shoot in this game. A lot of good looks. And so I think that's where you look at it and say, okay, once I've gotten into the paint, if I don't have a layup or a dunk, someone should be open. I should be able to get a clean look for somebody. And I think that's where just reading the game, still a young player. So as that continues to progress, I think, there's definitely room to grow. And I think there's enough to feel like he can progress in that area.
Yeah, I think that is the hope. But I think for RJ too, one thing I've been really enjoying is he makes good skip passes, especially out for threes. He sees the court well on that front. It just, to me, does feel like there are times where he puts his head down and only wants to go to the hoop.
Right.
And so, again, it's finding the right balance. But, RJ was a solid contributor last night. Quickly was really good. Scotty was really good. Gary was also really good. And I feel like we haven't really talked much about Gary Trent Jr. all season. He's been starting. He's moved to the bench, kind of similar to last season with the Raptors. Gary last night finishes with 25 points, shoots 9 of 12 from the field. A lot of those are pull-up, mid-range, pull-up threes, made 5 threes as well. Where are you at with Gary in terms of just like, what your assessment is of him as a player, and you keep it up for next season and beyond?
Yeah, I think in terms of keeping him beyond next season, I would like to think the Raptors probably look to see if there were offers for him at this deadline, and maybe there just wasn't anything that was worth taking on.
Yep. Okay.
And so if there's nothing really out there in return, do you then have the confidence that because he's a young player that you can build him up into something better, right? And that, I think, is a conversation to be had. So when you look at growth opportunities, even if you look at this game, started out really well, was shooting the ball lights out.
Yep.
Started the third quarter, he gets taken out early. 3 minutes into the quarter. And it's because Darko feels he doesn't have a lack of focus, right? And I think there were a couple of moments. There was one where, so in the first quarter, the Raptors were running an action where Scottie is handling the ball on the left side of the floor. Gary is coming to set the screen to get Ben Simmons off Scottie and get the mismatch against Cam Thomas. Now, initially in that first half, the Nets were giving up that switch. And they came out in the second half and made the adjustment and said, okay, we're going to ice this. We're going to force the ball out of Scottie's hands. Gary was smart enough to like slip the screen and get open for a three, but he didn't get in the right position, and it ends up being a turnover for Scottie. There was another one where Cam Thomas ends up wide open for a three, where Gary's just missed an easy floater in the paint and just does not locate Cam Thomas at all.
Right.
And straight away, Darko was like, hey, you are not locked in right now. Get your head in the game. And I think that is something I'm really looking for from Darko down this final stretch. It's like, hey, this is the team now. Let's see accountability, right? And let's hold people to a standard. And I think that's the key with Gary. It's like, hey, stay engaged and locked in on the defensive end. We know what you can do offensively. You are a shot maker. You are a shot taker. And so I think if he can just stay committed on the defensive side of the ball, if Darko can keep him accountable to that side of the ball, then there is maybe potential to grow there.
Yeah, you know, I think for Gary, this is the first time he's been in a contract year with the Raptors since when he first got traded to the Raptors. That was back in Tampa. He was restricted that year anyway, but still, you could definitely tell that he really wanted to make an impression. He had some really notable moments. He had, the game winner that he hit against Washington. This, again, Raul Neto tried to, flop against him. Remember that one? And he was able to knock down the three for that one. He also, in that stretch, had a 44-point game against Cleveland. I don't know if everyone remembers this, but he went 17 for 19.
He missed like 2 shots, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
He made all of his twos. He was a perfect 10 of 10 from 2, and he went 7 of 9 from 3 for 44 points against Cleveland. So I felt like there were these clear moments where he was trying to sort of assert himself, and he just played at a different intensity, right? And I think that there's a big opportunity now, especially now that he's unrestricted, to do the same thing. And I think that for Gary, the scoring is always going to be the main draw. The fact that he can shoot, the fact that he's a really good catch and shoot three-point shooter. I mean, when you look at his catch and shoot three-point percentage, and I don't know this is like a wild comparison, but he's with 0.5 percentage points behind Steph Curry on catch and shoot three-point accuracy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're the same level. I'm just saying he's shooting really well, and that's something he always does.
I mean, even in January, he led the league in three-point shooting.
Yeah. So what is the secondary skill, though? Because, for most starters, you got to do more than one thing at minimum. And I do think that his ambition is to be a starter in this league. What's that second calling card for Gary? And I think we've always been asking this question for the last, 3-4 years. Again, going back to the immigrant dad mentality, we're just asking for more. But seriously, okay, you got an A in three-point shooting. Where's your other A's?
Yeah. I think that's where when you see the lack of playmaking, right? Generally, there was a random game where he had, 7 or 8 rebounds, and you're saying, wow,
Yeah.
So can you get to a level where you're contributing more on the glass? Can you consistently be locked in on the defensive end? Obviously, you've had Gary Trent Sr. on the show, and when he's talked about, finding your role with an NBA team and what your ideal position is, I remember him saying, hey, you are what you can defend.
Right. He did say that.
So the question for Gary is, what position can you defend? And so if he can identify that and really make that a focus and make that stand out, then I think that's his clearest path to becoming a starter one day.
Yeah, and I think, again, this is so long ago, but you go back to when Portland was in the bubble and they had that undefeated run. Gary was a huge part of that, and he was their go-to defender. Now, of course, I think that speaks to especially Portland's personnel at that time. It wasn't going to be Dame, it wasn't going to be CJ. Was Melo on those teams? I don't know if Melo was on those teams, but ultimately, Gary was the best option for those guys, but he also played at a different intensity, and that always stuck in my mind in terms of when the Raptors acquired him. I was like, oh, we're getting this, you know. And sometimes we got that.
The bubble was different, man.
Bubble was
we
different.
had MJ Warren.
Like, oh yeah, TJ Warren, TJ scoring. Yeah,
yeah. The bubble was just different.
The bubble was different. You're right. But anyway, in any case, I think that there is more from Gary. And you even saw last night, for example, just him losing Bridges a couple of times, you know, and Bridges is not that dynamic of offensive player. Like, no offense to him. He's a good catch and shoot guy. He cuts around, moves well. You know, he doesn't take possessions off offensively or defensively, really. But, you know, he's not like so crafty that it's like, oh, you can't handle him. Like, you know what I mean? If you stick with him mostly and you guys communicate through your switches and screens and things like that, like, you can actually hold a guy like this a little quieter. And he's not like he had a crazy big game, but a lot of his baskets were due to sort of Gary losing track. I think there is this, and I heard this from a couple fans now, and even other media members asking this question. Do you even get to a point where you might say, well, because this season is about development, maybe you switch the starting group and you maybe even give Grady a chance to start, which we have seen Grady start one game this year. That did lead to the infamous introduction.
Yeah.
Which he clarified was big energy, to be clear. But in any case, yeah, would you want to see, you know, Grady start in his place?
I think if you establish a point where Gary Trent Jr. is not part of the future, and, you know, Bobby Webster said that it's TBD on Gary, but if they do establish within, you know, their own conversations that Gary's not going to be back next season, then I think absolutely move on. You know, then it's time to prioritize Grady Dick, get him as many reps with that starting unit as possible, see what's what there. And, you know, beyond that, you know, I think there's times where you might even have, if you're going up against two bigs, you might even be able to get Kelly Olynyk with Jakob Poeltl, see what that looks like.
I do kind of want to see that look once in a while. Yeah, you're right.
And I think that could be an interesting mix. In terms of a theoretical prototype that can fit this core, I don't think he's a starting level player right now. But when you look at him as an on-ball defender, he might be the best on-ball defender on the team, Ochai Agbaji. And so there might even be a conversation to be had there where do you give him a couple of starts where you see offensively when he's with the bench and he has to do a bit more and he's taking those extra dribbles, then it looks a bit clunky. But if he's with a starting group where it's just, hey, just cut to the basket, you know, if you get a corner three that's open, take it. Other than that, we just want you to defend the best perimeter player. You know, maybe there's a couple of games down the stretch where you also take a look at that.
Yeah. It's interesting because the wing is a little cluttered right now, positionally. You know, I think that maybe you resolve Bruce Brown's future. He played 25 minutes, for example. You could easily redistribute more of those minutes to a guy like Grady or Ochai, or if you want to give a chance to Jordan Nwora, who basically only has come in garbage time now. But, yeah, there is still something with Gary. It was just like, offensively, like, yes, we understand that Grady's also a shooter, but, like, Gary's level of shooting, at least right now, obviously he's like much more experienced and 5 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
But he's much better right now. And I think there's much more consistency. I don't actually mind Grady just like being comfortable with the bench role. I mean, I think we're like always trying to like force way too much and jump ahead on the action. I think that, you know, what we saw at the start of the season, he was involved in the rotation. Gary was struggling at that time as well. He ate into some of Gary's minutes. And then he cooled off. Gary, you know, came on strong. Now he's obviously in the lead and he's starting. For Grady, just let him go at his own pace. You know, whatever he's comfortable with right now, let's keep him comfortable. You know, don't shake his confidence. I like where his confidence is at right now. It seems to be in a good place. So I wouldn't really personally do it myself. Also, I don't necessarily want to close the door on Gary. You know what I mean? Like, I actually would like to see him. The biggest thing for me is, can you find and play the same game coming off the bench as you do with the starters?
Right.
Because he seems to always really struggle with coming off the bench, and it's a noticeably different player. I think there's a real good chance for him to be like a six-man type of player in the future. Not your traditional six-man who can handle and create for themselves, but still a guy who can come off the bench and do some good things for you. But, you know, speaking of Gary Trent Jr., it's time now for the spicy stat of the day.
Okay.
Brought to you by new Chunky Spicy Soup. Are you ready to get fired up? Yeah, typically co-host Blake Murphy would do the spicy stats, so I'm going to hope to do him justice in this way. And we're on the subject of Gary Trent Jr., so I looked up his shot chart for the season, and it's a very pronounced shot chart. When you are shooting well from a zone, it is green, and when you're shooting poorly, it's red. And basically, if you look at Gary Trent's shot chart, it's split. Everything on the left is green, everything on the right is red. So if you like actually go through the jumpers on the left side of the floor, Gary Trent Jr. shooting 48.3%, including 48.6% from three alone. So he is excellent on the left side of the floor.
Yeah.
Right side of the floor, when you add up all the jumpers, 33.7%. I don't know how that happens specifically. His three-point percentage drops off. His two-point percentage drops off. It's a 15 percentage point jump if he crosses over to the left side versus the right side. So I don't know.
Don't make no sense.
I actually don't understand why. So Vivek, do you have a theory as to why he's so much better on one half of the floor?
I mean, the only thing I'd say is, in general, you know, when you're shooting, like when you're entering that shot pocket as a right-handed shooter, you know, you're coming up off the left and you're going up. I think with Gary, you know, he's never going right.
Yeah, you know what? We might have solved it. Yeah. And so
we
got to just combine him and RJ, you know, like just.
And so I think there's just a general comfort with that. Man, RJ and Gary, you really might be calling them, you know, RJ, Amory, and Barrett.
No, they both do one thing, and hopefully they do two things and beyond. But yeah, shouts to producer Derek who said he's basically Zoolander. Anyway, we're gonna take a quick break. Good win by the Raptors last night. Hopefully they replicate it tonight against the Hawks too. But I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. And after the break, as we mentioned yesterday on the show, I really wanted to talk about Vince Carter, and who better to do that with than one of his former teammates. Welcome back to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, William Liu. Continue to be joined by fill-in co-host Vivek Jacob. And I've been wanting to talk about Vince Carter for a few days now, especially after he made the comments, now that he's Hall of Fame eligible, that he wants to go into the Hall of Fame as a Raptor. And as somebody like putting on the cards on the table, first year I tapped into the Raptors was 2004, 2005. So that was actually the tail end of Vince's time. And I've always obviously understood and heard the various perspectives on Vince, you know, but I literally came in at the very end of the party. So I wanted to ask some people like yourself, Vivek, and also like Alvin Williams, who's joining us on the program live from, where are you, Alvin? You're in Atlanta?
Hotlanta.
You're in Atlanta, Alvin. Yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, look, listen, I missed the party with Vince. So I need to actually ask people who were there, who, you know, Vivek from the fan perspective, you from literally, you know, being his on the court with him, about Vince and this time. Because, yeah, he did give those comments where he wants to enter the Hall of Fame as a member of the Raptors. Vivek, I know you got a lot of good questions on this. So I'm just going to turn the ball over to you because I know you got a lot of good things to ask Alvin about what it was like playing with Vince.
Alvin, I'm a bit older, so I can think back to some of those days and watching Vince do his thing. I specifically want to go back to his second season. And this is like the 2-week stretch where he had, you guys played Phoenix on national TV, and he had the 50-point game. He had the buzzer beater against the Clippers. He had the buzzer beater against the Celtics. And you guys won 11 of 12 in that stretch and helped you guys get into the playoffs. What was it like as a teammate during that 2-week stretch where Vinsanity was just peaking?
Well, for me, it was amazing to watch. I wasn't getting that much burn back then, so it was amazing to watch. Just seeing how he was evolving overnight, game to game, day to day, and you know, just coming back, winning a slam dunk contest, and his name was, a buzz was out of the building, and his name was going through the roof, and he was backing it up, not just from the athletic side, but from the skill side, hitting 3-pointers, game winners, and you know, the dunking opportunities and the things that he could do, but just winning games, showing that he had, you know, big time courage, big time game, cold-blooded, and he was an assassin, and he just was putting all of these games and stacking them all up, building up his resume. And as you mentioned, we were winning. You see a lot of players, they do marvelous and great things, but it doesn't equate to winning. We were winning, and he was showing out.
When you think back to, then you go into the playoffs, you get swept by the Knicks in the first round. The next year you come back, you take those lessons, you beat the Knicks, you hit that big shot.
I was going to say, they finally played Alvin. That's the big change right there.
We got rid of Tracy and put me in the lineup, and we got better.
Wow.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
Don't worry. We know.
But actually, you say that as a joke, but let's go back quickly. As Vince is really rising to this meteoric level, did you maybe see a little bit in Tracy starting to feel like, hey, I want that for myself, and starting to think that maybe I need my own team to do this?
Definitely. I didn't know he would say I need my own team to do this. And I don't even know if that was his mindset. Maybe it was, get from out of Vince's shadow, because it was Vince's show. But Tracy was showing also that same year, game by game. Tracy was the guy that we put on, and Butch Carter would play him at multiple positions. He would play the point guard. He would play the two, the small forward, the power forward. And he also would do it on defense. So he guarded multiple positions, and he was very valuable. Without his rise, the Raptors would not have made that push to get into the playoffs that year. But then, him going to Orlando, but I also think, he was going there with Grant Hill. So it wouldn't have necessarily been just a Tracy McGrady show. It was just the fact that Grant Hill got hurt, and it turned into Tracy McGrady show. But I don't think he was looking for just his show. I think it was more looking for an opportunity to play at home, opportunity to have a different look, and then just show what he actually could do in a different uniform. So, it was, but he was another heck of a player, and you could see his rise as well, right along with Vince's.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest what ifs. Like the biggest what ifs for the Raptors is what if Kawhi had re-signed after the chip? Because I feel like, they had everything set up and ready to go, and there was no new team that could have knocked the Raptors off the porch. But we obviously understood that he was always going to LA, and he did do that. The other big what if is what if Tracy and Vince were able to actually grow up together and spend more time and both grow into their peak, with Alvin running the show as well. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big three right there. So I think, okay, so for me, I've seen the highlights. Literally preparing for the show today, Vivek would just show me like a bunch of YouTube highlights of Vince. He's like, yo, look at this one. Look at this dunk. Look at this game winner. Look at this. And, so I understand, I guess, what was happening on the court. Can you take us through, like, what it was like, how big of a superstar and the media attention on Vince when it was, like, peak Vinsanity? Like, what was that like?
I mean, it was amazing. It was something, again, overnight. I remember, Vince's rookie year in 98 and us coming into the season. He and I both couldn't play at the time because I think it was coming off a lockout, and then we had to sign our contract. So we weren't really allowed to play and practice quite yet, right at the beginning. And we used to go to Eaton Center a lot. Okay. And people didn't recognize us. They definitely didn't recognize me, maybe here and there with Vince, but we could actually walk through the mall. And then maybe a month into the season, no matter where we went, we couldn't go with Vince. Like, if Vince couldn't go anywhere. And it just happened again overnight because of things he was doing. And I remember Vince asked me, hey, man, you want to go to the mall? And it was not enjoyable. It wasn't even cool to hang out with Vince anymore because we were going on the road. It was mayhem. And even in Toronto, I didn't even think about going out with him. So I just saw overnight the media rose up, and Vince just showed out again. And it was just one of those things where, again, overnight, and it was amazing to see how he handled it, right? He didn't come in with all the fanfare. He didn't come in with those high expectations. Yes, he was the 5th pick, I want to say, but he didn't have all the notoriety at that time. And it just happened. And the way he managed it and handled it overnight, it was amazing to watch.
You know what? The way you're describing it almost sounds like Scotty's going through a similar thing. Not to the same level of, like, Vince was like face of the league type of you know what I mean? But coming in with, like, not that much profile, but then no, all right, I'm pushing it too much.
Yeah, no.
Okay. I don't think Scotty can walk through Eaton Center either.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this.
It's a different level.
And yeah, a whole different level. Okay. Scotty's a great player, and the world is different now. Everyone, your eyes is on everyone. So, but I've seen little babies, little girls crying, little boy, like people crying to see Vince. And I'll tell you this, no one was coming to see Alvin Williams and no disrespect to any other players, but Vince was selling out the building when the Toronto Raptors played, right? Like that was it. We're going to see Vince Carter. We're not going to see the Toronto Raptors play. We're going to see Vince Carter and what he's going to do tonight, because if we don't catch it, we're going to catch it on another network. We're going to catch it on ESPN or something like that, the highlights. But it was a must-see game. And again, no disrespect to other players, but I truly believe that Vince Carter wasn't on the team, we might have had about 3 or 4 players along with our family members, or 3 or 4 fans along with our family members watching those games.
Oh, come on.
I mean, just for some...
No, seriously.
For some perspective on what Vince was doing. So obviously, first year, he wins Rookie of the Year. Second season in the league, he averages 25.7 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.1 blocks. Then comes the big season, right? The one where we're going to talk about the Philly series because we have to. 27.6 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists. And we're talking about averaging 27.6 at a time when, you know.
This is like him averaging 40 in today's game, basically.
Yeah. And so let's look at that season now. And, you know, you go into that series against the Sixers and you talk about how he handles pressure and expectation and going up against Allen Iverson, and they're just exchanging 50-point games and going back and forth. What was it like to just be a part of that?
Funny. You're funny. You're a funny guy, man. Vince and AI wasn't going back and forth at 50s. Vince was getting his 50s and AI was giving me his 50s by myself. So, but that was another.
I was leaving that out for you, Alvin.
You said you saw the playoff series. We know the facts. But again, exhausting. That was an exhausting series. I wouldn't have it any other way other than winning it. But, you know, you play a game, come down to the 7th game, last second shot, very ironically and airy, it's like this Raptors, when they beat the Sixers and they came down to game 7, the shot, but their shot went in, our shot missed. And we were on the Sixers home court, but it was one of those games that, man, it was a back and forth battle. Vince Carter going to work, AI going to work. But we had a team where Vince, he didn't succumb to pressure. It felt like it was never pressure for him. It felt like the moment was never too big. We had great leadership throughout that time. And oh my goodness, I'm sorry. And we had great leadership throughout that time, and it helped Vince alleviate some of that pressure and allow Vince to just go out there and play. And that was just one of those back and forth games. The crowd was bananas. Philadelphia has the aggressive crowd. They're in your face, walking the streets in Philly. It was exciting. And then coming back to Toronto, feeling the love. And it was amazing. I remember walking down the street and people were painting their cars half and half Maple Leafs, half for the Raptors. And cars were being painted and walking down the streets, people yelling out their windows. And that was a big time event. That was a big time moment for all of us. But Vince he stepped up again. It was moments in Vince's career early on where there were opportunities for him to take advantage and show the world what he could do. And he stepped up every time.
Yeah. So this is all the really, really good moments, right? And, you know, even that series, you know, the game 7, the graduation thing has been talked to death. We don't really have to go there unless you're particularly interested. But I think for me, it's like that's the inflection point. After that point, there were still really good Vince moments. You know, he still had made a lot of great plays. The team next year makes the playoffs, but you started to see more and more pressure. And when expectations rise, and you just got to rise with them at every single step, because if you don't, and injuries start to catch up, and of course that ultimately he ends up leaving, like that's when you saw like it just turned the other side, right? Because it was one thing when you're like the fan favorite, everyone loves you, and then afterwards, you know, you see the other side of that, which became really ugly. And that's the thing that I don't know, I'm really curious about, because again, I wasn't there for it. Like, what was it? Like, what was it that got so many people to flip? And people still, even to this day, when they hear Vince talk about, you know, I want to go in and represent the Raptors, it's my best years, you know, I love the franchise, a lot of people still holding on to this idea that like, yo, he betrayed us, or I got some negative feelings towards him. What was that moment? You know, do you guys remember? Alvin, do you remember?
Yeah, it was. I was highly disappointed. I was confused. I understood, the disappointment from the fans' perspective. I understood, you're losing your megastar. You're losing the person that brings you all the excitement. And from a Toronto side, and not knowing that as an athlete at the time, how personal, those relationships were. It's not just for the city of Toronto, it's for the country. Mm-hmm. And it was like a nationalism. It was like patriotism that you have with this country. It's not just playing for the team. It's like you're playing for the Canadian national team. And I feel like the fans really felt betrayed. I think they were let down, and and at the time, I don't. Maybe that the business or understanding the business of the NBA wasn't, the fans weren't aware of the business. People ask for trades all of the time. Now you just see people demanding trades. It was a time where when I got traded, Kenny Anderson just didn't even show up. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to Toronto at all. So I understand that disappointment. But it was disappointing to see how the fans reacted and responded to Vince. But I think also it was how well he was doing for New Jersey as well. Like, you're going to leave, and he had injuries and was up and down, and he wasn't playing as well, and he was making some certain comments that rubbed people the wrong way. And then he goes to New Jersey and just turns back up to Vince Carter, right? But he was going through a lot. There was a lot of management changing. It was coaches changing, and the whole direction of the team was going in a different direction that Vince was used to. So I don't know all of the behind the scenes things, but it was really disappointing to see how the team, the fans, and the city responded to Vince Carter when he came back and when he decided to leave.
I think it was just like a very personal thing for fans. Like, everyone got so attached to Vince. He was the face, and you're watching like a Ja Rule Ashanti video, and there's Vince jerseys in the back. Like, and Vince is everywhere.
Yeah, he really was.
He's leading the All-Star voting 4 times.
Yeah.
Like, you don't do that unless you're the top of the top in the league.
Sure.
And he was playing for the Raptors.
The Raptors have had 2 Christmas games ever. One time was when they won the championship. So the next year, you got to play on Christmas. That's the rule. And then the other time was because Vince was playing in Toronto. Like, those 2 ever, man. Christmas game.
And so I just feel like with the way things played out in that final season, to see him say stuff like, "Oh, I don't want to dunk anymore," and averaging 15 points a game and shooting 40%, and then as soon as he gets traded to New Jersey, at the time New Jersey, he goes up to 27 points a game.
Right.
And then, you even think about that return game.
Yeah.
The vitriol,
I remember watching that one, man.
The atmosphere for that game, that's one of like the worst atmospheres that has been there for a returning player, right? And it was extremely negative. And for him to then also hit that shot.
Yep.
And really stick a knife in the back of Raptors fans.
Was that the same one where him and Mo Pete were kind of like playfully, like kind of slapping each other? But like, again, like slapping each other in like a playful way because they're friends.
Yeah, they're friends, and
the ref
they're talking smack.
Yeah, only caught Mo like actually giving it back to Vince, and he ejected him.
Yeah.
I remember Mo got so pissed off, he took out that headband and he threw it in the crowd. Man.
Yeah. And so, Vince goes off in the second half, hits that game winner. I mean, I remember watching as a fan, and I just went straight to bed. And I was like, I've seen enough of this. And so I think it just became very, very personal for fans. I think on some level, the segment of the fan base that still feels wronged by Vince, I think on some level they want Vince to kind of take ownership of his part in that. And I think that will maybe clear up some for those fans. But I think on the whole, when you view it, the positives significantly outweigh the negatives. Like, yes, that final season was bad. You would not want that to happen with, someone who was a franchise icon, should have his jersey go up at Scotiabank Arena. But again, when you look at everything he accomplished as a Raptor, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, Alvin, do you think he should own up to anything? Or do you think it's just like he already did what he did and there's nothing more to say about it?
Yeah, I don't feel like anything should be revisited. It's just, and again, I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know what happened in the background. I don't know behind the scenes, but it's a career and you have your ups and your downs. It's a franchise. You have your ups and downs. So I'm sure it's both sides, but Vince was so impactful. And again, that's where I think the hurt and the damage came from others and how they viewed it. But again, you just never know. You just never know what happens. But I don't think Vince should have to go back. If there's some relationships he would want to mend or some things, people he would want to talk to, that would be on him. But I don't think he owes an explanation or anything because, again, he's talked about it before, but maybe he hasn't told his entire side of things. So it would be totally up to him, but I don't think he owes anyone an explanation at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, listen, I think especially you've seen the change in terms of the attitude, right? I think under the new management here, especially with time moving on and that. I remember one of the coolest games was Raptors were playing the Grizzlies, and Vince was on the Grizzlies at the time, and they finally showed like a little thank you to Vince, and he got the ovation from the crowd. And, of course, it was still a little mixed, you know, but it was like 70-30, 70 positive, 30 a little negative, and you saw how touched he was. And I think the more and more he's come back to play in Toronto, he's always got a really strong reception. And, yeah, I mean, next year, 30th anniversary, I'm sure there will be – why? I'm not sure. I guess I'm hoping that there will be something paid because you can't tell the history of Toronto without that. I think one of the last question I had about this was, did you ever play in Vince's, like, summer games, you know, the summer All-Star games they used to hold in Toronto? Yeah, well, tell us about that because, again, I missed it all the time. So what was that about?
That showed another level of Vince Carter's popularity. You know, he would sell that place out for a charity game. That was a charity game. I played in a lot of charity games.
Yeah.
Things like that. Have about 5,000 people there or 10,000. The place was so, it felt like, again, a playoff series. It felt like everyone was there. The excitement was there. You had a bunch of celebrities come in and host it. And then you had other superstars from the NBA come by. And then Vince would have his Toronto Raptors teammates come. And so parties after that. It was a big time. It was during Caravana. It was during that time. So it was a huge, and I would like to say that Steve Nash tried to carry it over once Vince left. And I'm not sure if it did so well, but those few years that Vince put that game on, they were fun. It was a pickup game, and you know, we just got it in. It was really cool. But the attention and excitement that Vince drew to that, and again, people like the fans may take it personal, but again, everyone loved to play and come to Toronto once they're there. Like no one like talks about their fans, and we don't like the fans. We don't like their fan base. It was always other things. It could be the weather. It could be whatever. But as far as the people, taxes, the weather, the distance, another country, this, and all that. But the fan base and the community and just everything, everyone loves it. I've never met anybody in the NBA that did not love playing here. Even when they were here, Damon Stoudemire, Trace, they loved Toronto. Yeah. It was just the fact that another side of the business or whatever drew them away or go somewhere else. But I don't think any fan should ever take it personal because it definitely wasn't because of the fans. It was an organization also still kind of new, figuring things out, figuring the people out, figuring the culture of athletes, especially I think young Black athletes out. Yep. And I think it's just everything coming together. Everyone's learning everyone. And it just wasn't a fit all of the time.
There you go, Alvin. Appreciate your passion and thanks for taking the time to go through some of these fond memories and giving us context around Vince's career in Toronto. And good luck on the broadcast tonight, man. We're looking out for you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you,
anytime, man. Alvin Williams, what a class act, man. You know, honestly,
legend.
Bro, former players always are like, I would have done this. I would have done this. Every Alvin story is, man, I don't know. Nobody was in that. No one was recognizing me in Eaton Center. You know what I mean? So humble, man. But come on, he really was a great Raptor. And yeah, next time we had him on, we got to ask him, did he go to Palladium, Mississauga Palladium with Tracy McGrady? Because that's also another great story that has come out recently. But anyway, we're gonna take another break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. When we come back, let's check in with Marc Stein. Welcome back to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Lou. Big thanks once again to Alvin Williams for calling in and going down memory lane. It's given me a lot of good context around Vince Carter, the peak of it, everything like that. Just a momentous occasion that was when he was with the Raptors during those moments. And yeah, thanks to you too, Vivek, for giving me your context.
Of course.
Sorry, it's not the same when he played on the team, but I actually really do appreciate you, man.
Nowhere near the same, man. It was amazing hearing from Alvin.
Yeah, it was amazing. So we're now joined by Marc Stein. And yeah, Stein, I want to ask, first off, how was All-Star Weekend for you? Because I saw you wrote a whole column on, let's not try to expect that much out of the All-Star game. How was All-Star for you?
I had a good time, but yeah, the column was kind of a separate thing. It's just I just think it's too much outrage. You know, we get outraged in the moment about how bad Sunday's game is, and it's just like, to me, there are much more significant issues in the NBA that need fixing. And by today or tomorrow, nobody even remembers the All-Star game. So it's just, you know, everybody wants, you know, they want defense, but like, God forbid, the first time someone gets hurt playing defense, you can count on that outrage getting cranked up about 20 notches. So I just think in 2024, All-Star games, they don't really work. I mean, the NFL has gone to flag football. I don't think I need to explain to your listeners that the NHL now has 44 All-Stars divided up into teams of 11 to play 3-on-3. Like, I mean, those sports have already figured it out. So is it time in the NBA to do something else on Sunday? That's fine. But, like, you know, All-Star Weekend is a convention for the league. It's not about the game anymore. And it's the most important thing about All-Star is being an All-Star is, you know, like Scotty Barnes. It's in the records now. He's an All-Star, and nobody can ever take that away from him. So I just don't get, like, Bob Ryan is one of my heroes, but, I mean, he was just so offended, and he said we should all be offended by what we're watching, and I don't get that worked up about it. But just going to Indy and being there, had a terrific time.
Mark, very quickly, you did mention there's more important issues. If there were a couple that you could put at the top of the list that you'd like to see the league address, what would they be?
Well, I think, look, we live in the three-point era now, and these games, they get away from us in the three-point era, and that's just a reality. And there's a statistician who I just absolutely love on Substack. His name's Justin Kubatko, and he did his kind of summary of where we are statistically 2/3 of the way through the season. 89 games by his count were blowouts decided by 25 points or more already. And that's like 11% of the games, and it's the second highest ever. So I think that's something that needs to be worked on more than a blowout in the All-Star game. And look, I think the whole league is curious. The discussions have already started. You know, the competition committee gets together multiple times a year, and they've already started talking about, do we need to bring some defense back? Do we need to bring in some measure of physical contact, something closer to hand checking? I don't think it's going to be radical stuff. Like there are some people who think we should get rid of the corner three. There are some people who think we should outlaw defensive 3 seconds. I don't think you're going to see changes that drastic, but are they going to legislate back in some contact? I think that's a fair assumption because it's just gotten a little bit too offense heavy.
Well, Mark, we did see, like, I forget, maybe it was 2 seasons ago where there was one of the points of emphasis coming into the year was allowing more of that physical, you know, nature to be played on defense. And you did see, like, at least a noticeable amount of defense being played. But again, when we see these rule changes, whether it's like, we're going to stop flopping, we're going to find people for flopping, like, it tails off after the first month. That point of emphasis is put in, and then it tails off. And maybe it's just because other teams and other players adjust too, but I do feel like that effort isn't fully sustained. So, you know, hopefully we do see the league do something about it.
Last season was traveling. You know, at the beginning of the season, we just had a slew of traveling calls. And the nature of the discourse today, because everybody has their own megaphone on Twitter, is that if they bring in more contact, there'll be people shouting about how that's no good. And
that's going to lead to more threes taken.
Again? So, like, I don't know. I mean, it's just in the 3-point. I mean, look, there were 168 threes taken in the All-Star game.
Yeah.
One team was making them and one team was not. And that's why we got the game we got.
Yeah.
And the reality is that happens in the regular season a lot too.
Yeah.
Sometimes teams just are blazing from deep and the other team can't do anything about it if they're not hitting too.
Yeah, I mean, the Raptors play the Atlanta Hawks tonight. The Hawks have been involved they're the poster child of this. I mean, they played that game against the Pacers this past year, and they lost despite having scoring like almost 150 points without OT. Like, so there obviously has to be something to sort of help address it. I guess nobody really necessarily wants to embrace this new style of game either, which I feel like I think it is the natural state of basketball, if it were, especially NBA basketball, should be around like 100 to 110 points. Essentially what playoff basketball looks like. But obviously regular season-wise, it gets a little kooky. Mark, I was reading the Stein line as always, and I was getting some insights.
You're the one.
Sorry?
You're the one.
I am the one. If there's one Marc Stein newsletter reader, it will be me.
Thank you.
And I was looking at, you had some notes in there about what the Nets may do long-term with their head coaching search, because we saw Kevin Ollie make his interim debut last night at Scotiabank Arena. The Nets lost once again. Honestly, they look terrible. But, yeah, I mean, what is the future of Brooklyn's actual head coaching, spot? And also just long-term, what are the Nets doing with that roster? Because when I watched them last night, I was very confused as to what all those guys were doing there and what the direction of this whole team was meant to be.
Yeah, and look, a lopsided game in Kevin Ollie's debut is obviously worrisome if you're a Nets fan or if you work in the Nets front office, because effort was cited as one of the key drivers for doing this now. And the Nets' last game before the break is a 50-point loss to Boston. Mm-hmm. So the minimum you're expecting, I think we all expect it when there's an in-season coaching change, is that new coach bump, that increased energy. And Kevin Ollie talked about how he had his own list of points of emphasis to try to generate more effort and energy from his team. So to see the Nets look that listless, it just kind of underscores, look, they have a lot of draft capital to make moves. They're going to have cap space, and they believe that, let's just say, this is hypothetical, this is not reporting, this is just hypothetical, if the Cleveland Cavaliers and Donovan Mitchell don't come to terms on a contract extension in the future, and if the Cavs ever reach the point that they would actually field inquiries for Donovan Mitchell, the Nets feel like they have the draft capital to get into that mix. The Nets have Mikal Bridges, a very coveted swingman on a very team-friendly contract for the next couple seasons. So one of the reasons why the Nets have rebuffed all these offers for Mikal Bridges is because they love his talent. They especially love his talent at his current contract number, and they want to bring in at least one more star. And now you have a real twosome to build around. But, the current roster, Nick Claxton certainly has fans around the league. Cam Thomas has certainly shown flashes. Cam Johnson has certainly shown flashes. But, the Nets were a 500 team. That infamous game against Milwaukee, they sat all their guys. They got fined by the league $100K. They're 6-19 since that game.
Damn.
So, I mean, it's more than karma at this point. I mean, I think they've paid the karma tax already. But yeah, I mean, people will throw out the name Mike Budenholzer because obviously he is the most decorated available coach that's on the market. And Sean Marks and Mike Budenholzer obviously have shared ties, shared background with the Spurs. But I would think Mike Budenholzer is going to be a candidate for numerous, any job in the offseason that opens. I think he's going to be on the list. And just, I haven't spoken to Mike Budenholzer. This is purely my read. But I would imagine that he would be more interested in going to a more ready-made championship contender type situation if such a job opens, rather than just go coach the Nets. So, I do think that, the Nets have said that there will be a search no matter what happens for the rest of the season. They're going to do a search, and presumably they're already working on that to some degree. But, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they go in the coach on the coach front. But honestly, I think it's even more interesting what they do with the roster.
Mark, the Raptors played the Nets last night. They will play the Hawks tonight. You had some notes about them in the Stein line. When you look at the direction of that team, obviously nothing materialized with DeJounte Murray. We've heard some whispers now maybe in the offseason it'll be a lot of discussion around Trae Young. What's the sense you're getting of where that team is headed?
I mean, that is really the external topic, and the external view is that, that's the question that other teams are asking. Mm-hmm. Will Atlanta decide to trade Trae Young and maybe keep DeJounte Murray? I don't know that the Hawks, I think it's premature to say that the Hawks know exactly which direction they're going to go. I think the rest of the way the rest of the season plays out factors into that. But obviously, right after the trade deadline, the Hawks were playing pretty well, and they didn't make a trade. They kept DeJounte Murray, and then right before the break, they just lose in worrisome fashion to Chicago and Charlotte. And so, the Hawks are in the play-in mix barely, but, they certainly had higher expectations than where they are. And I think the reason that you're hearing more about Trae Young, the reason why it seems more real than it ever has, is because you can actually pick out destinations now where there are teams that you could see being interested in Trae Young. San Antonio, because they have Wemby, they have the perfect defensive anchor and big man to pair with Trae Young and mitigate his defensive shortcomings. So because San Antonio needs another all-star player, and the whispers have been there that the Spurs would have a level of interest in Trae Young, and the whispers have been out there maybe even louder that if Trae Young were to leave Atlanta, that San Antonio is a place he'd like to end up. Again, that's not coming from him or his camp, and I want to underline that and make that clear, but that's kind of chatter that has circulated around the league. There's a belief in league circles that if he had to leave Atlanta, he wouldn't mind ending up in San Antonio. So, and then the Lakers, we know the Lakers had one available first-round pick to trade at this trade deadline. They decided to keep that first-rounder because they want to have 3 on draft night to take bigger swings, bolder swings at the trade deadline, as they have to ready themselves for, does LeBron James pick up next season's player option? Does he potentially go somewhere else? Even if LeBron James stays, the Lakers know that long-term they're going to need another all-star companion for Anthony Davis. So there's been this rumble. There's been a lot of chatter out there that the Lakers want to go after a perimeter star this offseason. So the Spurs and the Lakers have emerged as at least these theoretical destinations for Trae Young, and that's, I think, why you're hearing Trae Young's name really more than we ever have in his 6 seasons in terms of potential trade. But look, he's had a really good year offensively.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody averages 27 and 11. So, he is still a very productive player. I was happy for him that he got to go to the All-Star game. But, the Hawks are high on the list. The Bucks are probably on top of the list in terms of teams generating league-wide curiosity now, maybe the Warriors too. And I think the Hawks ain't far off. They're up there.
Yeah, I'm very curious as to sort of which of those 2 teams, if he goes to either one, because both are very intriguing to me, just as a casual observer, not casual, as a general observer of the whole league. I would like to see Trae play with a guy who can really cover from defensively, also be a lob target. And, both those teams could really use a boost offensively. And I guess my question is just, who would have the better package? Like, do the Lakers have more to offer, or do the Spurs have more to offer? I feel like do the Lakers offer the 3 picks and an Austin Reeves, maybe you get slightly ahead of what San Antonio can offer. I think San Antonio has more picks to offer.
Yeah, I mean, San Antonio is going to have no shortage of draft capital, but I mean, the Spurs, who's their second best player at this point? I mean, are they willing to? Is it Vassell? Are they willing to trade Vassell? Yeah, I mean, it's the Lakers. It really depends. And this is again, this is a byproduct of other teams kind of trying to forecast the market. the Hawks, again, to be clear, have not said we're trading Trae Young. And so it's hard to know what Atlanta would prioritize because at this point, I don't think they've quite reached that point yet. And look, they also could, the other option that the Hawks have is they could decide again to trade, to make DeJounte available. They could go that route again and see if that's the best way to proceed forward. And maybe they can acquire players who fit better around Trae Young than what they currently have. But look, I think that the real, I spoke when I wrote about this, and I wrote about this on the Monday after the trade deadline. I talked to one league source who I would say is very well versed in the Hawks dynamics. And the viewpoint from that source to me was, deep down, Atlanta knows it has to move one or the other, that the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray partnership has not worked as intended. And if the Hawks indeed feel that way, then you have to presume that one or the other is going to be in play this offseason.
All right, well, something much less scintillating, but it is the natural question I ask after the All-Star and after trade deadline is over, is just buyout market. To me, it seems like it's really quiet. The only guy I've really heard is like Otto Porter's not really showing up to the Jazz. Maybe he got spotted. I don't know, man. I mean, we had Otto obviously in Toronto the last 2 years. He played 14 games. It's always a question if he's going to be available. But where are we at with the buyout market? It seems quiet to me.
Well, I think the best buyout players have realistically landed already, starting obviously with Kyle Lowry going to Philly. So, I mean, I think I don't know that there is that much left on the buyout market. There are certainly teams that would love to make additions, and there are teams that are looking, but, it's always, I think year after year, we typically overstate the impact that a buyout market signee is going to have. But, Kyle Lowry, Spencer Dinwiddie, those guys found their new teams almost instantaneously because there just aren't that many difference makers available.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go with something more interesting because, again, I was reading the newsletter. The Mavericks have hired an FBI agent to be vice president of basketball communications. Yeah, Mark, you got to walk us through this one. That's in your backyard. What's going on? They going to the FBI for employees?
I reported that. That's really all I know.
Wow, that's cool though. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, it struck me as very interesting and something new because in all my time covering the league, I can't remember a scenario like that. I'm sure on the security side, in the modern NBA, teams have much more robust and deep security staffs than they ever have. I'm sure those on the security side, there has to be, former FBI agents who are involved in that. But working on the communication side, if it's happened before in my less than trusty memory, I don't remember it. So, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Still learning more about how and why, but I'll try to satiate your curiosity and get more. What I'm curious is, my main curiosity coming out of the All-Star break was you guys are such all-stars. You guys get an All-Star break. You guys are like star players who get to go to after Indy, they get to go to Cabo. So the show's been on hiatus all week till yesterday. Is that true?
That's what happened. After we called you last Wednesday, we finished the show at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we just yelled 1, 2, 3 Cancun. You know what I mean? I think.
And Blake's a superstar. That's why I'm here.
Oh, you don't even understand. Blake Murphy, in particular, he's getting load managed. He's the Kawhi Leonard of the situation. I mean, he's out for the next 2 additional weeks as well as he looks to rehab ahead of the Blue Jays season. To be fair, he has to cover 2 beats. It's not just Raptors for him; it's also Blue Jays. So this guy has to own the whole city. But that's well, now that we have Vivek here, so Vivek Jacob is a massive United fan. And we have a City fan, and of course, I represent Liverpool as a Chinese man in Canada. But Mark, we finally have the space to talk about the EPL title race. City is at 56 points with 25 matches played. Arsenal's at 55 with 25 matches played. Liverpool is at 60 with 26. I mean, how are you feeling, Mark? Is this going to be another one of those years where City just wins every single game for the last 2 months, and it's you guys holding the trophy again? Like, where are you at confidence-wise?
You're really not going to like to hear this, but I can't fully confirm this, but City plays United in the Manchester Derby on March 3rd. Don't be surprised if I'm representing the Raptor show at that game. I can't promise, but just don't be surprised.
Wow.
Okay.
That's the real all-star of this situation. Yeah, we talk about 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Damn. Where's that gonna? Where is it gonna be? Is that in the Etihad?
That's City. There's a Champions League game against Copenhagen.
Oh wow.
A few days after that, then City's at Anfield. That's all I can say right now.
No, you're not going to the
all-star break.
You're not also going to Anfield.
All I can say right now.
My goodness. Wow, there's levels to this.
Yeah,
there's real levels.
Sure are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, V, I know I know you love soccer more than basketball. It's okay. I'm the same. Where are you sitting on this title race at the moment?
Logic says City because this is exactly the stretch run where they thrive, and
they're way healthier than Liverpool too.
KDB since coming back from injury has been incredible. You've got Haaland finding a rhythm. So logic says City, but I am going to pick Liverpool to win the title.
Let's go.
I think
you'll never pod alone. Let's go.
I do think the emotional boost of this being Klopp's final season, and possibly, a couple superstars might be saying this is the end for them as well, with Klopp moving on.
You mean the emotional anchor and pressure of Klopp saying this is his last season?
Okay. All right. You'll see at Anfield. Don't worry. You'll know what pressure is when you go to Anfield.
I mean, look. The reality is, the truth is, obviously, Liverpool do have so many injuries right now it's a problem.
Yeah,
it is a problem. It is a problem.
Well, they're spawning these random NPCs, just like these Academy products wearing like 84 and 52, and they're coming in and they're getting results.
Yeah.
But
so since we know that you have since Will is yet to make it to Anfield, has Vivek to Old Trafford?
V, have you gone to Old Trafford?
I have not been there for a match. I've only visited during the off season and had an incredible experience there. Did the whole tour, and
wow,
it was amazing to see all the trophies. To be out, you can't actually
a lot of dust on those trophies.
Enter the yeah.
It's from a while back.
It's true. But
I've only been there once. And it was the Fergie time game when Michael Owen scored the winner in about the 117th minute.
Oh, wow.
And that was walking out of that stadium was a painful experience. But
well, that's all I do now, Mark.
For most of the afternoon, it was incredible.
I just watch YouTube clips from 10 years ago. And just try to relive the glory days.
It's great because they all have podcasts. Rio's got a pod. Gary Neville's on every day.
Yeah,
Beckham is doing his own documentary.
Actually, Wayne Rooney was just on, what was it, the Stick to Football podcast? Yeah. So
nice.
That was a cool episode.
There you go. All right. Well, Mark, obviously we can't have more of this conversation with you because you're going to tell us you were at every single one of these historic games. And, I just hope that, if we call you while you're away at these matches, that we make sure to schedule our calls so that we're not interfering with the football viewing schedule. But appreciate you, Mark, for always making time to join the program. And we'll call you next week.
Yeah, actually, now you guys reminded me. I got to make sure that Wednesday. We'll figure it out. But we'll figure it out.
Honestly, if Liverpool is playing City at 3 p.m., I think we should break the show. we should take a break in the
Blake
show.
Murphy, I will not miss an assignment.
Wow.
Whew.
There you go. All right, Mark, appreciate you. And for us, we're going to take our last break of the day. Been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. When we come back, let's go around the NBA a little bit and also look ahead to tonight's matchup between the Raptors and the Hawks, the one that nobody can resist. Welcome back to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, William Lou. Last segment, Vivek Jacob co-hosting. How do you feel about co-hosting, man? I know you did like a million shows back when we were at the old studio. Now that we're in this one, TV studio, you and Alvin just chopping it up. I know you were fanboying inside. You're like, yo, this is my childhood. Like, I can't believe it. How you feeling about co-hosting those last couple of days?
It's been amazing. I mean, first shout out to all the fans because there's been a lot of positivity and a lot of love from Twitter. So,
Nice. Awesome. Great.
Shout out to everyone there. And, I will say we're not in my car anymore. We're a long way from recording in my car after the Raptors go in, what was it, the G League Showcase.
We were at the G League Showcase.
We were at the G League Showcase. Yep. Then we couldn't get over to downtown in time, so we just watched it at a bar. We watched the Raptors game that night at a bar.
It was a Shoeless Joe's, which honestly, it's not a place that you and I typically would end up, but it was right beside where we needed to be.
Exactly.
And it was a good spot. It was a good spot, yeah.
Lorenzo Brown and Malcolm Miller, I think.
I didn't know that's where you're going with this. Yeah.
Make it from the 905 game to Scotiabank Arena.
Yeah, they took the Up Express.
Yeah. And the Raptors hammered the Cavs that night.
Yeah. I remember, man.
And we were thinking, maybe this is the year they can beat the Cavs.
we were number one seed in the East. We had this really good depth. We changed the way the offense was played.
Yeah.
The Cavs were down bad. That was Isaiah Thomas's very memorable but ultimately tragic tenure with the Cavs, and they played against Cleveland, and obviously the Cavs had already beaten the Raptors twice in the playoffs at that point, but still Raps won that game. It was 130 something to 110, beat them by a fair margin.
Yeah.
And we just had to record a very steamy podcast in your car. That sounds horrible, but it was a joyous time. It was a slander pod. It was one of the original slander pods, honestly.
That was our commitment to the game.
That was a real commitment to the game. That's also when you told me that Navbacha pressured you into
changing my license plate.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell that story, please.
Because I didn't buy my car from his dealership.
Yes.
And so when he saw my car and it said a different dealership, he's like, you got to come and get the plate switched to say my dealership.
He's like, a brown man driving a Hyundai, and it wasn't from me? He came for his turf. I like that.
He took it personal.
He took it very personal. Did you fold?
I did. I mean,
that's the most important part.
He might have helped me out with some servicing and whatnot. So I was like, it was worth it in the end. But
man.
So I mean, it's just amazing, just thinking about where we were then, and for you to have this show now,
right?
And to be a part of it for these couple of days.
Of course,
obviously,
man.
Blake will be back soon.
Yeah.
But appreciate the opportunity to have me on.
Man. No, I appreciate you helping out, really, because what am I going to do? Host a show alone? 2 hours on the Raptors alone right now would be tough. No, I mean, I think that's one of the coolest parts, right? You're talking about that was 2018. We were Raps Republic at that time.
Yeah.
And obviously now, biggest platform, biggest show in this fancy TV studio. And I think the coolest part is we make essentially the same thing. We actually stuck to that formula. And largely speaking, we make it with the same people, and, it was always great to, we were at Yahoo together as well. So, one thought came up of we got to find some people to help spell Blake. I was like, Vivek was my first call. So appreciate you. We're going to go around the NBA now. That was nice. I like that. That was nice. We don't really open up that much on the podcast.
Yeah.
Around the NBA, I'm stealing this from, former co-host Alex Wong, which if you didn't know how around the NBA topics were made, it's called going on NBA Central and scrolling headlines and just dumping them into the chart. I know he's listening right now and smiling as he hears that because that's his whole game. So Nikola Jokic last night, might have heard of him, posted a triple-double. The stat line reads 21 points on 10 of 10 shooting. Literally a perfect 10 for 10.
Pork belly.
Oh, he was serving that pork belly for sure. 19 rebounds as well. 15 assists, all in 31 minutes of play. Obviously, they defeat the lowly Washington Wizards. Jokic now has recorded a triple-double against every other franchise in the NBA. He hasn't done it against the Nuggets because he's only ever played for the Nuggets. He's done it against the 29 other teams in the league. My question to you, V, is who's your MVP right now? Because obviously Embiid has fallen off because he's missed too much time due to injuries. He really would have had a really great chance of this. Is Jokic going for his third MVP here?
I think he's right there. I think
with who though?
I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander should be up there in the conversation. I think the way the Thunder are playing, the way he's been playing and leading that team, obviously you give credit to Chet Holmgren and what he's added to the Thunder, but to go from what they were last season to be flirting with the best record in the West this season, Shai, we saw it coming along last season, and for him to take it another step this season, obviously a two-way player getting it done on both ends. And so I think he's in the conversation. It's unfortunate what Embiid is dealing with, because obviously he'd be right there. Luka Doncic is going absolutely nuts.
I was going to bring that up. Yep.
So he's got to be in the mix. And then I think out of respect to the teams with the top records, you have a Jason Tatum in there. I don't think he's doing quite as much as the guys we just mentioned to actually win it, but you always respect the team with the best record in the league. I think if there's an X factor, if there is a wild card in this race.
A wild card, okay.
I think you got to put Kawhi Leonard in there.
Ooh.
With the way with the way the Clippers have played.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't think of that one.
With the consistency that Kawhi has shown, not just in his performance, but in his availability.
He's playing back-to-backs and stuff now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they finish strong and finish with the top record in the West, I think he has to be in the conversation.
That was interesting. I never thought of that one. But I do hear you on that. I think, one of the things with Jokic is he posts these stat lines, right? Like, it's again, 21 points, perfect 10 of 10 from the field, 19 rebounds, 15 assists. Like, that's absurd amount of production.
To me, he's the best player in the league.
Yeah.
Obviously, MVP, we're evaluating the best season, right?
Okay, yeah.
There's obviously other factors.
The thing is, the only thing with him is, like, when you start to talk about a guy trying to get his third MVP, in this case, you have to do something even bigger than what you did before. And, you almost aren't judged purely based on the standard of what other players are doing. You always have to top what you previously did. Jokic just actually had better seasons than what he's currently doing right now, which is that's the thing that's so difficult for him to get up to. The Luka case. So Luka also had a great night last night.
His numbers are so silly right now.
His numbers are incredible last night. He had 41 last night to beat the Suns. I feel like every time you look up, the Dallas Mavericks are beating the Suns because Luka has 40. But Luka on the season is averaging 34.3 points per game. That leads all players in the entire league. He is averaging 9 rebounds a game, 9.6 assists per game, a steal and a half. He's shooting 49% from the field. He's shooting actually a career best 38% from 3 on over 10 attempts per game. He is obviously generating all of his own offense. He's generating all of the offense in Dallas outside of Kyrie doing his thing, and Kyrie's been playing great too. I think when Luka came into the league and he instantly won Rookie of the Year and he looked amazing, All-Star by year 2, we're like, Luka's for sure going to be a future MVP. I mean, if he's already doing all this and he's not like already clear-cut MVP, I don't know. Like, what's Luka's case? Like, what does he need to do? What does the Mavericks need to do for Luka to finally get his first MVP here?
I mean, individually, he's doing everything he can.
Yeah.
I think it's just the team record that's holding him back a little bit.
Okay.
Obviously, I think they've won 7 straight now.
Mm-hmm.
And
they got reinforcements of the deadline.
Yeah. They got some depth. They got P.J. Washington. They got Daniel Gafford. They addressed that center position, which they needed to. And Kyrie Irving has been healthier of late.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he missed some time. So I think, if they're sort of winning 50-plus games, then he's right there in the conversation. I think that's the crazy thing is there's so much high-end talent in the league right now.
Yep.
You are, with all these players, you're literally splitting hairs.
For sure.
And
except for Tatum.
Yeah. I think in terms of the cream of the crop conversation for MVP, we're looking at Jokic, we're looking at Shai, we're looking at Luka.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we haven't even said a word about Giannis. I mean, I know.
Right. Totally forgot about that superhuman. Yes.
Yeah, and like I know the Bucks have underperformed, and especially with everything that's been going on of late, he probably won't figure into the conversation as much as he should, but he is having an absolutely ridiculous season.
Yeah.
And
he's having a Giannis season, honestly. It's just a regular thing for him now.
And again, it just comes back to that point of, with each season, what is the hair that you're splitting between these guys?
Well, I mean, would you consider this Giannis's best season? Because there is a case for that. And I'm not asking us a trick question. He's shooting 62% from the field, like, just period. You know? Yeah, he's shooting 62% from the field. Let's just start and finish there. He's obviously averaging 31 points, 11 rebounds, 6.4 assists. 6.4 assists is also a career high for him. A steal and a half, a block. You know, he's Giannis. Like, this is actually, like, honestly, statistically, it's actually better than his 2 MVP seasons. Even, I will say with the caveat that, like, the league this year defensively and just in general has been a lot weaker, and so offensively teams that there's like an inflation across the board. You know, you can't compare this, like, this version of a junior chicken versus, like, back in the day when you could get, like, 3 junior chickens for $5. Like, it's not the same. But still, like, there's a case that Giannis is actually having his best ever season, and we barely even mentioned him for MVP.
Yeah. No, I think there might be people who are so used to him and the Bucks being in that all defensive conversation and the Bucks being so good defensively that maybe the drop off there as a team has hurt him and hurt his individual case. But if you were to just watch him individually, he's been fantastic.
He's been amazing.
And so, yeah, again, it's just you have so much talent. And that's why even with All-Star, when you're looking at some of the snubs, right? And
look at the snubs in the West, man. The West would have had 5 more All-Stars that would have made All-Star in the East.
Yeah.
Who didn't make the team, actually.
Yeah. And
like
Fox, Sabonis.
Yeah.
Like, neither one of them made it. And then you look at Trae Young, you know, initially, he didn't make it, right?
Yeah.
And his numbers have been ridiculous. So I do think there is something to be said for just where the talent is now. And so you've got just these absolutely juggernaut MVP cases. And it just comes down to, you know, this final race saying, okay, who's maybe taking the edge here in terms of maybe just winning a narrative.
Yeah. Prediction-wise, if you had to pick right now, 2 months out at the end of the regular season, who's counting, by the way? What you got?
You know what?
Who's going to finish top?
My heart says SGA.
Okay.
But I am going to go with Nikola Jokic. I think some of the fatigue would have actually gone from last season with Embiid winning it. And I think, you know, recognizing his greatness. His greatness, you know, coming off finals MVP, all of that. Unless the Nuggets don't, like, make a run and they kind of plateau at that, what are they, 4th seed right now? Yeah. If they were to just kind of plateau there, then maybe, and the Thunder were to run away with the 1 seed, then give me Shea. But I think right now, if I had to pick, I'd probably go Jokic.
Okay. I'd probably go with Jokic too. But I don't know, man. Luka, there's a compelling case for Luka. And I feel like when you look back on the totality of his career, there's no way a player of this caliber did not win an MVP at some point. He's got a long way to go, but he's having his best season. And the Mavs are surging, and they are getting better. A team that is not surging and not getting better pretty much ever, basically, is the Washington Wizards. Jordan Poole benched for the first time this season for a team with 9 wins total, and then promptly responds with a 4 of 17 performance off the bench for Jordan Poole. It was widely reported that essentially he's considered the worst contract in the league now because there are still many more years for him to go. Do you feel bad for Jordan Poole at all?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean,
all right, why not? Why not? Why is that such a no-brainer for you?
What's there to feel bad about? I mean,
bro, he's playing terrible. He comes off the bench for a 9-win team.
Yeah, and I think that says something about his game. And did you watch the inbounds play that happened last night?
No. Well, take us through the play.
So I believe he's under the basket, inbounding the ball.
Yeah.
And Corey Kispert, I believe, runs straight toward him like this. And he fakes the pass initially.
Okay.
And then he tries to make the pass. But the ball just squirts out.
Oh, man. How many times, by the way, I feel like I need a statistical like breakdown of how many times a franchise has had Shaq in a fool, like highlights, by organization. Because the Washington Wizards, they got to be like the Boston Celtics or the LA Lakers of just like Shaq in a full MVPs, man. Like, the obviously JaVale McGee back in the day, Nick Young back in the day, Andre Blatch back in the day, even Otto Porter when he went on autopilot, I believe was with the Wizards too. And now they got Jordan and they got Kyle Kuzma, the Kuzma combo, as I like to call them. But
like the main thing that Poole didn't deserve was Draymond's punch.
Oh no, I mean, no, he didn't deserve to be assaulted, man. Come on, of course.
That's the thing that you feel bad about. But in terms of what's going on with the Wizards, he's just making bad decisions. He's playing basketball with,
without shame.
You said it.
He plays like he doesn't have shame, man. Like, please take us. Yeah.
So it's like really inefficient, really carefree, to put it nicely. And so, in terms of what's happening with the Wizards, I don't feel bad for him.
All right, fair enough. I guess fair or bad for him is not the way to phrase that question. But I do pity him in a way. It is kind of sad to see him. But
to be stuck with the Wizards?
Honestly, they deserve each other at this point. You know what I mean? Like, it actually makes perfect sense that Jordan Poole, of all players, plays for the Washington Wizards, of all teams. The last one from around the NBA. This is from a friend of the program, Jared Weiss of The Athletic. He talked to Jaylen Brown about the prospect of doing the dunk contest again next year. And Jaylen Brown said, quote, "If they ask me and nobody else cares to do it, bleep it, I'll do it again." Is that a threat? I do not want to see Jaylen Brown in the dunk contest again. I'm sorry. No.
Yeah.
No, man.
That was not enjoyable.
That sounded like a threat when he said, "F it, I'll do it again."
Yeah. He's like, we got Bill Simmons. We got Celtics lore. They'll get me in the finals again. I mean, that was terrible. Like, it looked like they were blatantly just trying to, make a case for stars to come back to the dunk contest. And it's like, we will treat you better. We will do whatever you need. Like, can we please have the stars back in the dunk contest? That's what it looked like.
Oh, yeah.
And then McClung was like, I'm just going to jump over Shaq.
Yeah. How about I jump over Shaq?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Shaq is probably the most used dunk contest prop at this point. A lot of people have used Shaq as the dunk contest prop. Someone's got to dunk over Wemby. That's the new challenge.
That would be
jump over Wemby. Be real.
Shaq's
7 feet tall. That's cool, but let's see you jump over 7'6" or 7'5" or whatever he is. Yeah.
Did you see the someone posted on Twitter the end of Space Jam?
Oh yeah.
With like MJ reaching out.
Yes.
And then they put it next to a photo of Wemby.
Yes, he did it against Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner was like trying to take a charge, like literally above the charge circle, like so far out. And Wemby not only ate the contact, which was a block, and he just stretched his way into like a finger roll. Yeah, no, he's terrifying. Any chance you get to see Wemby in your area, you must do it. He's like a must watch. It's like him and Steph right now are like the two you got to be in the building to see them. But yeah, Jaylen Brown. I guess my last question on this is just which dunk was worse, when Jaylen Brown put on a glove and did a good dunk, I guess objectively, but dunk contest wise, really mid dunk, except it was with a glove, and it was on his left hand. Y'all joking I don't have a left hand. Guess what? I got to put on a Michael Jackson glove and dunk a ball with my left hand. What was worse between that or when he jumped over, the short streamer with the catch from Jason Tatum on the second attempt? He dunked the ball again, very normal dunk, and then upon landing, hit a dab and pretended to do the D Brown no look. Which one was worse?
That was worse.
That was worse.
The D Brown, it's like, oh, I've landed. Now I'll cover my eyes. Like, it's
I've landed. Now I will cover my eyes.
Like,
goodness.
It's like when we're watching soccer and someone tries to do something crazy. And it's like, oh, I don't think the cameras will see this. And it's like, there's cameras everywhere now.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
did
yeah.
he think people were not going to notice that he only covered his eyes after the fact?
You're right. This is the Luis Suarez biting people of dunks.
It was so much worse. No, that was the worst one, for sure.
That was pretty tough. But the glove one was nasty to me, man. And one of the judges even had the audacity to give him a 50. They're like, ooh, he put on a glove. I was like,
No.
yeah, that was tough. All right, well.
The judging was shameless.
Judging was shameless. But shouts to Raptors legend, Fred Jones, who once famously won a dunk contest on a layup. But anyway, it's time now for Between the Lines, brought to you by BetRivers. Take a chance. Raptors take on the Atlanta Hawks tonight. The line is Raptors plus 7.5 over-under for this game, set at 245. Feels a little low, honestly, for an Atlanta game, especially with the Raptors defensively not having many answers to Atlanta, as we've seen in the past couple of matchups. Injury report, the Hawks are healthy. RJ is listed as questionable with he missed some time with his knee, and he's actually been listed as questionable for a lot of these back-to-backs. I think it's a true questionable. He goes to the game, tests it out. If he's okay, he'll play. It's kind of what happened last time when RJ was questionable as well, but he's able to play. He just played last night as they beat the Brooklyn Nets. But Vivek, what is the key matchup you're looking for here as the Raptors take on the Atlanta Hawks for the 18th time this season?
Well, in terms of a matchup, you're looking at quickly at the guard position, going up against whether it be DeJounte or Trae Young.
Yeah, probably DeJounte.
Yeah, so I think that's the one I'm looking at. I think there's going to be some interesting challenges for the Raptors in this one because if you look at the previous night, going up against Brooklyn, it seemed very much like they were saying, hey, there's not a lot of playmaking in this starting five at least. You got Schroeder coming off the bench. And so we're going to apply a lot of ball pressure, create a lot of turnovers. That's how you get, 46 fast break points?
46.
Double check that.
I think it was, yeah.
46-7 in the fast break. And so that's obviously not going to be the case here against the Hawks. And so how do they take on that challenge tonight? And quickly is going to have a big part to play in that.
Yeah, honestly, what I want to see from this matchup is quickly pick up some of the foul drawing tips that Trae Young has. This is not even a shade or slander kind of thing. I actually do think for small, quicker guards who don't always want to take all the contact going all the way to the basket, like not like a Westbrook or John Wall type of guy. Like you have to understand how to manipulate and generate some contact. And not that I want to see quickly start to do the Trae Young, like let me jump into your elbow type of thing, but like a couple more of those tips. I actually do think there's something valuable there. But I'm not going to pick this game for me because last game I picked Brooklyn, and that's really embarrassing because they lost by like 28 to the Raptors last night. So that was Between the Lines, brought to you by BetRivers. Take a chance, and that does it for us today. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. It's time to get fired up. Make sure you find The Raptor Show where you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. Big thanks to the producers, Alvin Man, our board producer, Derek Brandeo, Jennifer Rolnick, David Sis, Jared Manatite, helping behind the scenes. Big thanks to our guests today, Alvin Williams, Marc Stein, and, of course, Vivek Jacob for filling in and co-hosting the last 2 days. We'll talk to you next week.